A cave stands silent, its entrance swallowed by shadows, its stones shaped by forces older than memory. Step inside and the air grows colder, heavier, as if the darkness itself carries the weight of forgotten worlds. What lies here is not just rock and dust, but a secret so profound it threatens to unmake the history we thought we understood. Could the human story, the very tale of our origins, be incomplete, even distorted? Could this cavern hold proof that we are not the first to dream, to carve meaning into the world, to build something greater than survival? If so, then the past is not what we believed. It is stranger, deeper, and far more unsettling. The cave looks ordinary from the outside, just another hollow in a limestone ridge, half concealed by moss and stone. But inside its depths, the story of humanity begins to unravel in ways we never expected. Because faint engravings emerge on the walls, spirals curling into endless loops, outlines of animals etched with careful precision, and geometric patterns that look suspiciously like maps of places we cannot name. And for years, scholars dismissed them as scratches, meaningless marks from idle hands, until new methods of dating revealed the truth, that these engravings are more than 60,000 years old, far older than the supposed dawn of human creativity. And with that revelation, the story told in textbooks begins to crack. For decades, we believed Homo sapiens alone carried the torch of imagination, the only species capable of abstract thought, of painting visions, of crafting symbols. While Neanderthals and Denisovans were cast as primitive shadows, brute survivors who endured but never dreamed. Yet the evidence inside this cave paints a different picture. For across the walls run deliberate smears of red ochre pigment, arranged not randomly but in thoughtful designs. While stalagmites have been broken and reassembled into enigmatic circular structures, as though marking sacred ground, and hearths darkened by soot stand in alcoves where fire once burned in just the right places to cast shadows over the carvings, transforming stone walls into flickering theaters of meaning. And in those moments, the image of the brutish, thoughtless Neanderthal collapses, replaced by something far more haunting, a visionary mind reaching beyond survival, creating ritual, weaving myth, searching for meaning. And the strangeness only grows as archaeologists dig deeper through layers of sediment, discovering shells that must have been carried from distant coasts, beads polished and strung as ornaments, pigments transported from quarries miles away, and stone tools so finely crafted they rival those of later cultures we once thought unique. And these findings tell us these people were not isolated wanderers, but part of networks that traveled, that traded, that exchanged not only goods but perhaps ideas, because to carry shells inland or pigments across valleys is to connect landscapes with threads of meaning, and suddenly the line dividing us from them begins to blur. For if Neanderthals decorated their bodies with ornaments, shared materials across groups, and painted symbols in firelit caves, then they were not the mute cousins of our imagination, but participants in a much larger human story, one in which thought, creativity, and ritual were never confined to a single species, but shared across branches of our family tree. And the questions this raises are unsettling. Because if symbolic thought arose in multiple human species, then perhaps the very thing we believe defines us, the spark of imagination, the birth of culture, was never uniquely ours, but a shared inheritance flickering in many places at once. And what vanished with them was not the absence of genius, but the silencing of entire worlds of myth and memory. Stories lost to time because their voices left no written trace. And as we follow the evidence further, the cave becomes a mirror that forces us to look back at ourselves. For here we see that Neanderthals were not crude but sophisticated, not silent but expressive, capable of art, ceremony, and perhaps even language. And the deeper we go, the more fragile the line between us and them becomes, until the categories themselves feel artificial, inventions of a modern mind unwilling to accept kinship with those it once labeled beasts. And as the torchlight flickers over engravings, tens of thousands of years old, we are left with the haunting realization that we are not the sole heirs of imagination, not the only species to dream in symbols, but the last survivors of a tangled lineage where creativity sparked again and again across deep time. And the most pressing mystery is not what they lacked, but what we have chosen to forget. For their world was as rich in meaning as ours, and the silence of the cave is not emptiness, but an echo of voices that once sang, prayed, and wondered in the dark. And as we dig deeper, we find that the human story is not a straight line of progress, but a mosaic of brilliance. Ritual and survival, a web of interwoven lights in which Neanderthals, Denisovans and others stood not behind us but beside us, shaping a past that is far stranger and more entangled than we ever dared to believe. If the walls of the cave reveal that we were not alone in our capacity to dream, then the bones scattered in its soil remind us that history itself is written in fragments fragile enough to vanish, yet strong enough to challenge everything we thought we knew. Because hidden among the ashes and stone are remains not just of tools, but of beings who once walked beside us, beings whose legacy endures in our own blood. For modern genetics has revealed that traces of Neanderthals and Denisovans live within us, meaning we did not simply replace them, but mingled with them, shared lives with them, and in doing so carried forward pieces of their world, shaping our immune systems, our skin, even our ability to survive in harsh climates. And this discovery collapses the idea of a clean boundary between us and them, showing instead that humanity was always a tangled web, its branches meeting and parting in ways we are only beginning to understand. Yet the truth is even stranger, for DNA tells us of ghost populations, entire groups of ancient humans who left no bones we can hold, their existence revealed only in faint genetic echoes, shadows of cousins lost to time. And this knowledge reshapes the past into something more mysterious than a simple ladder of progress, revealing instead a labyrinth where paths crossed, merged and disappeared. For too long, Neanderthals were described as crude, but their remains tell of survival through ice ages, of hunters who faced mammoths with stone-tipped spears, of communities that cared for the injured, of skeletons whose broken bones had healed through compassion. And these discoveries expose tenderness where we once imagined brutality, ingenuity where we expected dullness. If they were so much like us, why did they vanish? Some point to climate, others to chance, and still others to our species' larger social networks. Yet none of these explanations prove inferiority. For Neanderthals created art, ornaments, tools and rituals, and perhaps their disappearance was not failure but fate, the roll of history's dice. What is clear is that they did not vanish completely, because their DNA endures in us, woven into our identities, making us mosaics of multiple lineages rather than pure descendants of one. And that realization humbles us, for it means we are not the pinnacle of history, but simply the survivors of a deeper and richer human family. The cave stands as witness to this truth. Its walls speak of creativity, its soil yields bones that prove kinship, and its silence forces us to accept that the human spark was not uniquely ours. That imagination itself was a shared fire burning in more than one branch of our lineage. And the haunting question is not what they lacked, but what we have forgotten. Because their voices are gone, their myths erased, yet their presence endures within us, urging us to see that the human story is not one of triumph over beasts, but of entanglement, of survival interwoven with loss. And as we walk back into the light, we cannot help but wonder what other revelations still wait in undiscovered caves, ready to show us that our history is far stranger, deeper, and more astonishing than we ever dared to believe. If caves and bones reveal that our story is not ours alone, then the silence of what has been lost reminds us how fragile history truly is, because for every artifact uncovered, countless others have already crumbled to dust. And yet the fragments that remain are enough to transform how we see ourselves, for they show that imagination was not a singular invention of our species, but a shared spark flickering in Neanderthals, Denisovans and others whose names we may never know. And this means humanity is not a straight line of progress, but a constellation of lights, some bright, some extinguished, yet all part of the same sky. The bones tell us they endured ice ages, hunted great beasts, cared for their wounded and buried their dead. The pigments and engravings tell us they sought meaning in ritual, and the DNA within our bodies tells us their legacy did not vanish, but lives on in our blood, shaping who we are in ways both subtle and profound. If they were so much like us, why are we here and they are gone? The answer is elusive. Perhaps climate shifts fractured their populations. Perhaps chance and catastrophe struck at moments when recovery was impossible. Perhaps our larger networks of communication gave us an edge. But none of these explanations prove superiority, only survival. And that realization forces us to see that our dominance today is built as much on fortune as on brilliance. The truth is even stranger, for genetic research reveals ghost populations, ancient humans whose bones have not yet been found, but whose echoes live within us, reminding us that the family tree of humanity is far more tangled than we ever imagined. A forest of branches that grew intertwined and withered, leaving us as only one among many possible outcomes. And here lies the most haunting question. What might the world look like if Neanderthals or Denisovans still lived among us? If we were not alone but one branch in a living chorus of human species, their myths and knowledge woven with ours, would we have become more? Or would rivalry have destroyed us sooner? We will never know. But the caves whisper that imagination is not unique, that creativity is not singular, and that what defines humanity is not exclusion, but connection. The recognition that we are mosaics of many lineages, each voice shaping the song of survival. And as we step back into the light, leaving behind the cold silence of the cave, we carry with us the weight of this truth, that to be human is to be part of a story larger than ourselves, a story filled with loss and brilliance, with forgotten sparks that once burned as brightly as ours, and the only way to honor them is to keep searching, to keep asking, to keep remembering that the past is far stranger, deeper, and more astonishing than we ever believed. If this journey through the hidden corridors of our history has stirred your imagination, then stay with us, subscribe, share, and continue exploring, because the next discovery may yet rewrite the human story again. As we reach the end of this journey, the cave stays with us in silence, its walls still holding stories that stretch far beyond the limits of our memory. And as we step back into the light, we realize that what lies in the darkness is not only history, but a reflection of ourselves, a reminder that we are not a single story, but the product of many voices, some long gone and yet still alive inside us. The engravings in the stone, the beads carved from bone, the pigments painted with patience, and the fragments of DNA found in our blood all speak to one truth. Humanity was never a straight line, but a branching path, a web of connections and encounters and mixtures that formed what we are today. For so long we told ourselves that Homo sapiens were unique, that only we painted and buried our dead and dreamed of worlds beyond survival. But the evidence shows another picture. Neanderthals shaped tools with skill, crafted ornaments with care, and painted with ochre. Denisovans survived at mountain heights beyond our reach, and even ghost populations that left no bones behind still live within us, carried in the hidden code of our genes. We are mosaics made of all of them, not the pure survivors of one branch, but the living result of many. This should humble us because it tells us that survival is not proof of superiority, but the outcome of chance and circumstance. Perhaps our wider networks of cooperation helped us endure. Perhaps climate shifts weakened other groups. Perhaps luck simply favored us for a time. Whatever the reasons, our survival is fragile and never guaranteed. When we look at a handprint pressed into stone tens of thousands of years ago, we are not staring at strangers, we are staring at kin. They too searched for, meaning they too wanted to leave a mark. They too wondered about life and death. The cave forces us to see that imagination was never ours alone. It was a shared fire burning across different human lineages. And here lies the most haunting thought. What would our world look like if they had not vanished? If Neanderthals still walked beside us? If Denisovans still carved spirals into stone? If the chorus of humanity had been many voices instead of one? Would our myths be richer? Our sciences broader, our understanding of ourselves more complete? Or would rivalry have torn us apart faster than nature ever could? We cannot know, but even to ask the question changes how we see the present. It reminds us that diversity is strength, that creativity thrives in multiplicity, and that we are not the final word in history, but only one branch that happened to last. The cave does not give us certainty, it gives us wonder, and wonder is perhaps more powerful than answers, because it drives us to keep searching. The silence of its chambers is not empty. It is filled with echoes of ancestors who still live in us, urging us to remember them, urging us to see that the human story is deeper, stranger, and more connected than we were ever taught. And so as we step out into the daylight, leaving the shadows behind, we do not close the story, we continue it. Every discovery, every excavation, every bone and every symbol is another thread in the fabric of who we are. The past is not finished, it waits beneath our feet in soil and stone, ready to surprise us again and again. If this journey has left you with awe, then stay with us. Share this story and subscribe for the next exploration together. We will keep following the trail of echoes, searching for the lost voices of our ancestors and uncovering the truths that still shape us today.